Thank you very much. We wanted to have a conversation here with two very accomplished executives and talking about building global sports brands. To my left, I have Anita DeFrance, who's Vice President of the International Olympic Committee, and that's probably selling herself short based on the conversation we had upstairs and what you've accomplished. As well as Devin Johnson, who's the President and COO of Interrupted. Obviously a very exciting time, so I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more from you. I thought just to start off for the group, maybe you could talk a little bit about the career path and what has led you to your passions and accomplishments today.
Ladies first.
Ladies
first.
I'll accept. I am one who had no organized sports experience till I arrived at college. And so it is remarkable that I am an Olympian. It's remarkable that it's impossible that I am a vice president of the International Olympic Committee. I started out as an attorney. I went to law school at the same time I was training for the 76 games. And miraculously that worked out. Didn't kill myself. And then I realized I wanted to try it again because we won a bronze medal. I really wanted that shinier one, that gold one. And I started my practice of law, but then came, you guys are too young to remember, James Earl Carter, who was president of these great United States, and he decided that in order to stop the Soviet Union, which you probably don't remember, the best thing to do for its invasion of Afghanistan, which you might remember, was to keep the US Olympic team at home. And they did their best to destroy the Olympic movement. It was another shameful period. And the problem with that, you think, oh, well, it'll happen 4 years later. 4 years is a long time. And people, by the way, we received not a penny of federal support. There was absolutely no nexus of control that the president had over us. We were private citizens. So I wound up suing the US Olympic Committee and the White House for the right to compete. I lost, but I hate talking about losses. Yes, but I did it, right? And that's probably why I was elected an IOC member. Well, I came out here and worked for the organizing committee for the 84 games, so I can talk about that. But then the IOC noticed me, and I was elected in '86 and have been an IOC member since '86 and will, as long as I live, till I'm 80, which will be in 32, I will be an IOC member till then. And the Olympic movement is unlike any other organization in the world. One last statement, I'll let you talk. We are, unlike professional sports, we are a values-based movement and organization. And that is a big difference, besides the fact that we're every 4 years instead of every year.
It's amazing.
Yes.
Well, congratulations, you're an Olympian. I don't know what to say. How do you follow an Olympian?
All the other Olympians in this
By the
room
way,
out here.
you should get some stories from Anita. There's a number of wonderful stories.
I played Little League Baseball.
That's good. Start. You got to start. You had organized sport at a young age.
There you go. So my background is a little, it's a little circuitous. I started as a business major at the University of Michigan. Go Blue, that's what I'm talking about. See? You can't go anywhere without. And I think I was an accounting major and went through the paths and went through all of that and did the internships and all that stuff. And soon realized in my first job that I hated accounting. And so after that realization, I spent a long time trying to get into the more marketing side and was, talking to Leo Burnett and talking to a bunch of the ad agencies, and they said, oh, you don't look creative, so we're not gonna allow that. And so the second place was media. Media was, I thought, an opportunity for me to be a part of, I think the way that I think about it is I like to enable creativity. I may not be creative, but I can, work with creative people, enable them from the business side to allow them to accomplish and achieve their goals. And so I've spent most of my career doing that. I was at Tribune Company for 5 or 6 years. That's a local media company. Then I went to a national media company. I worked for NBC Universal for about 7, 8 years or something like that. And then what did I do after that? Oh, I went back to Tribune, never a smart move, never go back. There's ever a lesson, never go backwards. So I went back to the higher role, but just still never go backwards. And then moved back home to Chicago and stayed there for a bit, and then got the call to move to LA. And for the last 4 years, I've been leading Uninterrupted pretty much since its inception. And I assume we'll talk more about that, but that's pretty much my career path. But in the middle of all that, I did serve on the board of USA Taekwondo. So I've been in the Olympic movement, did that for about 4 years or so. And so supporting the folks over at the USOC and all that stuff. So I know a little bit about that, getting a board off probation. We can talk.
We had some challenges.
Yeah, those are conversations over drinks.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so that's really kind of my career.
That's great. So changing patterns in sports media consumption, how important was that to Uninterrupted being launched? And then how important is it for this direct-to-fan for athletes, celebrities, talent? Can you speak to that?
It's everything. It's our raison d'etre. I mean, if you know the origin story of Uninterrupted, what happened was LeBron and his business partner Maverick Carter were on a plane, really kind of sketching out. And I think this was right after LeBron announced that he was going back to Cleveland after the Miami stint, where his championship stint, if you will. And I think part of the conversation that they had at the time was everyone remembered the decision. Everyone remembered how that went down and how that made them feel. And his approach going back to Cleveland was a little different, a little more intimate. And what he did was a first-person essay written by Lee Jenkins in Sports Illustrated. And in that article, as he's expressing himself, he says that I want to come to my fans uninterrupted. And that was the origin of how Uninterrupted started. And it really was the springboard to figuring out a path for athletes to kind of control their own narrative and have conversations directly with their fans and supporters that are less filtered by journalists and other platforms that sometimes take pieces and bits and pieces and take pieces that make sense for them and make sense for a broader narrative that they're trying to create in an article instead of what the athlete is actually saying. And so we have, we have a video of Odell Beckham Jr., and this was a few years back, and he was saying, there was some kind of conversation about him wanting to be the highest paid athlete or the highest paid wide receiver. And there was a 3-minute long video of him talking, expressing himself, and every headline was about him wanting to be the highest paid receiver in the league. And so that's an example how if you're an athlete, if you sit there and you give someone your time and it's 3 to 5 minutes or whatever it is, and someone only takes that snippet, it's not really fair to them. And so our platform is built on, and it started with something very simple like that, and now it's podcasts. Now it's long form documentaries. Now it's short form content on webs. It's a show on HBO called The Shop. It's a lot of things, but it started with that one simple insight of allowing athletes to express themselves.
So a business built around athletes expressing themselves, and now I'm going to go all the way over to the Olympics, which has a completely different model in terms of how thinking about athlete voices during those games. Can you talk about that and the Olympics brand globally?
Sure.
And how you think about?
Again, by the way, you're looking at careers. IOC members are not paid, so get that out of your mind. We're volunteers. And sports is based on volunteers. It's really important, or else much sport wouldn't exist. Little League wouldn't exist without volunteers. But our issues are more broad. The Olympic movement is worldwide. We have 206 national Olympic committees, each with their own sets of issues within their own countries. So we have rules about what you can and cannot do on the medal stand, because it would destroy the games if every third person on each medal stand had something to say about how their country was not doing the right thing. And although, anyway, you can understand and although some of you may recall or have learned about Tommy Smith and John Carlos in '68, there wasn't a rule then. They did not violate a rule. They kept their medals. They were asked to leave the village by Avery Brundage, who was president of the IOC, a US citizen. And they left the village, but they stayed for the rest of the games and kept the medals and all that.
So they couldn't do that right now?
Well, we could.
Does everybody know what we're talking about?
Yeah.
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 Yes.
And by the way, it's funny too. It was not Black Power. It was a unity symbol. And in fact, the idea to wear the gloves came from the silver medalist, who was from Australia's wife, who had the idea of putting the gloves on. So there was a year-long advance called the Olympic Project for Human Rights that had gone on for a year, and trying to convince athletes not to go. So the U.S. would say, okay, this is terrible. Our athletes aren't going. We're not winning medals. This is awful. We better do something differently. But eventually, the athletes, it's every 4 years, it's your life. So almost all the athletes went and competed except a Bruin. Al-Jabbar refused to compete. So you guys are like that too.
So a question to both of you, with athletes are controlling their storytelling. They know that they're brands in and of themselves, right? And they're thinking about how to take that brand through social media or through other platforms. How do you help instruct them, coach them, make them understand the power of their word?
We want very much, for especially the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic team, we're now the USOPC, not just USOC, to help athletes understand why on the award stand, just as in the venues, we do not allow advertising. So they must not advertise what they wish, but they do have social media, lots of it. And if you're on the medal stand, you will have a press conference and you can say whatever you want at the press conference to make your views known. So that's fine. We give opportunities, but not in the venue and not on the medal stand.
Okay. And for Uninterrupted, the way that we look at it is we consider athletes non-traditional storytellers, in the sense that they're really good storytellers. If you were in a locker room or if you were sitting around at a bar talking, you can't beat a storyteller of an athlete. I bet you could tell us some great stories of.
But I can't.
But you can't about the Olympics. And the way that we've kind of evolved that is now we're giving them a platform to do that. So the answer to your question of coaching, we don't coach them. We don't coach them on. What we're doing is just amplifying and allow them to be their self. And so, we have a mantra called More Than an Athlete, and that's really the kind of the just do it for Uninterrupted. And it's really just a nod to the notion that all these athletes are more than an athlete. When you were competing, you were certainly more than an athlete when you're making stances. You're suing the White House and the Olympic Committee. That's a more than an athlete stance. If you were just an athlete, you would have just said, okay, well, when's the next competition? And so what we're about is making sure that in that stage, if we were around in that year, we would have made sure your story was told and we would have supported you and amplified your message and maybe even potentially get other athletes to kind of represent and sound off with you. That's really our function. We're not the coach. We're not the trainers. We're just the amplifier. We just want you to be you.
Right. Are you a business partner with them?
With whom?
With the athletes?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So have you seen that change? I work with the NFLPA and the NBPA, and I guess I wonder if in the 4 years you've noticed the sophistication of them understanding their prowess outside of being a business person outside of being an athlete.
Without
Maybe
question.
Can you expand upon that?
Athletes understand the voice and the opportunities they have. They understand the value of it. As a company, we're a business, we're a for-profit enterprise. And so our goals are to amplify the voices, but also make money and create business lines and revenue and et cetera. So we do that. And if we make money utilizing an athlete or in partnership with an athlete, our mission or our objectives are we just make sure that the athlete gets paid. Yeah. So there's never a scenario where we're capturing money. Like if we're working on a documentary on an athlete, like we just announced, what did we just announce? We announced Naomi Osaka. We're going to do a Netflix documentary with Naomi Osaka. And with that, she's going to get compensated. It's not us doing it and saying that, you should just be lucky that someone's telling your story or someone got you to Netflix. So as an athlete, you certainly understand your platform and the ability to speak your mind and tell who you're about. But sometimes you need a little help kind of amplified and getting that into the places. And so it's easier for us to have a conversation with Netflix because we're a company that does that. We have relationships with Netflix, ESPN Plus, your old people, and who else? HBO, Showtime, all the way down the road. So we have those relationships, so it makes more sense for us to create those opportunities, but make sure that they're adequately compensated.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
You did answer my
Okay.
question. That's what I wanted to get to, that piece, yeah. Okay, so there's a globalization that's happening in the sports world. NFL may be moving to London, or expansion south of the border, or to Canada, beyond, already there, or the NBA being in China, right? Knowing that this is a global expansion of U.S. sport to outside of the U.S., and that you may be one tweet away from really cratering your business in one particular region, as being the original global entity, how would you coach those leagues to think about the fact that not only where your host cities are, but how you take a brand like the Olympics and make that resonate with all the different regions and the different cultures that exist around the world?
120 years. Time. Oh, the Olympic movement was put in existence in 1894 and the Games in 1896. And so we've survived 2 centuries and a millennia to be here and to know for the athletes that every 4 years, you'll know in advance where and when the Games will be. And we've been able to fulfill that promise except for World War I and World War II.
Two, I think.
World War II, yeah. World War I, the war came after the 16 games and before the 20 games, so it worked out.
Yeah.
But how do we do it? By the tradition, and again, it's values-based. It's not, I mean, it's important to have a championship event of any sort in professional sports, but it's based on fair play and mutual respect. The Olympic Village is the most amazing place you'll ever be. Now, you guys live near an Olympic Village. The one for 28 will be all here. Last time it was shared with USC and then UCSB for the rowers and most important athletes. And canoe kayakers, guess what my sport was. This time it's all going to be here, the Village, which is a remarkable thing. There'll be 10,500 of the most exquisite human beings you'll ever see. Half of them will be women, half will be men. By then we will have completed our run towards that. And I hope the membership of the IOC, I was the 5th woman elected back in '86. Now there are 37 women serving at the moment. So we're moving towards 50-50 and everything. And our goal in Tokyo was 50-50. Messed up because baseball teams, we have 6 baseball teams, 6 softball teams. Softball teams have about 11 or 12. Baseball has like 2.5 times that many, so that messed up our numbers because they have so many more players on a team. I kept saying we'll have 12 softball teams, which will equate to 6 baseball.
Oh, wow.
They didn't buy it. But.
So Devin, how much does global play a factor in how you think about decision-making for your business, knowing that athletes themselves are global brands and all of your distribution partners and your storytelling need to be told and are being told around the world?
Yeah.
How does that factor in?
I mean, we're very fortunate that sports is a global opportunity that everyone takes advantage of. And so, we often get asked, do we only work with basketball or, professional athletes? And amateurism works with what we do also. We've done, pieces on rock climbers. And so, which is, I think, a new Olympic sport.
Sadly, but yes.
Yeah. Sadly?
No, I didn't say that.
Wow.
That was someone else.
I didn't hear it. And so, even from our perspective, strategically, how we're kind of thinking about it is we're looking at what the global sports are, and so basketball is a global sport. Soccer, or what we call it soccer, should
Football.
be called football.
Yeah, thank you.
Sometimes in the
use that
office,
word.
we call it. You don't use that S word.
No, I
Never.
don't use the S word. No.
Okay, so you just call it football. Do you call football American
International
football?
football.
International football.
That's what I refer to it as.
Oh, okay, fascinating.
ESPN.
And if I say the S word, then people know what I'm talking about. I don't have to finish that.
Yeah. I'm kind of torn. I'm still, I played soccer growing up, and so I still kind of think about it. My kids play it, but in a global world, but football is what it is, and so I struggle. Wait, you have a point of view?
When I gave my intro, I mentioned, and I hate to not be Mike to say this, but in my intro, I mentioned that on Sports Talk just earlier this week, somebody was talking about basketball saying, nowadays, the world is global.
The world is. See? So, I'm just as dumb as that guy. So in our global macro world economy, so when we think about going back on point, how we expand, we're expanding, football is probably one of our major initiatives. We are kind of following the footprint of football across the world. And so when we think about expansion, we're following kind of that football. So that means Europe, that means South America, that means Africa. It means a bunch of places where we don't normally play. But we're fortunate basketball is, I think, and I don't know how it works, someone told me that surfing is like, becoming one of the...
Oh, it is.
Yeah. Is that true? You a surfer? Yeah.
Where will they surf for Paris?
What? Oh, wow.
Yeah, surfing in LATAM and Brazil.
Yeah, I think in Brazil, it's the number
And
2
in
sport.
Africa, it's huge.
It
My
is.
friend, it's huge in Africa. When they did the endless summer, they had to ask the surfers to go away because they wanted to suggest that only these Americans were surfing around the world.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and this is the discovery, right? So, we operate under kind of the philosophy that anyone with a body is an athlete. So we don't discriminate. And so, when I learned that surfing is, one of the probably top 5 sports in the world, guess what? We'll be doing surfing content. So for us, following that and then working with these streamers are all global properties. Disney Plus is a global property. Netflix is 130 million subscribers, if not more. So, from our perspective, as long as we're following those trends and making sure that we're being a representative for all athletes, that creates tons of opportunities globally. So that's how we think about it.
Yeah.
Could I add to my answer, which I mentioned that we're 4 years. Well, it's not quite true because 2 years we have the Olympic Winter Games and the Olympic Games. So what do we do in between? That was the problem for us. So we've created the Olympic Channel so that you can look at previous games, and we have both the internet version as well as the terrestrial with NBC, who are our partners. And by the way, the U.S. still provides more than, I would say, maybe 65 cents of every dollar that goes to the Olympic movement. So thank you, United States, for supporting the Olympic movement and suffering through all the ads and stuff. We appreciate it because it makes the difference. So we realized that we had to reach out, we had to use these, and way back, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years, we had a conference on what to do about internet rights and even radio rights and so forth. And we decided we weren't smart enough to figure it out, so we bundled them. So NBC has the rights to all games in the US till 32. And therefore, it's up to them to decide how to bundle the shows or let you see exactly the sport you want. The television networks do all that.
So it was the perfect segue, so thank you. I appreciate that. A well-oiled machine up here. Global brands, marketers, right? Whether it's interacting with the rings and the storytelling of the Olympic Games, and obviously tons of ads, but within that, how do marketers think about communicating their messaging? And then Devin, to you, knowing that you have this direct relationship that's nuanced in terms of just running a normal 30-second commercial, I'd love to hear how you deal with brands.
Well, for getting the huge amounts of money from sponsors over a 4 to 30-year period almost, there has to be something important that they get in return. And what is it? Inspiration. You cannot buy inspiration. And the games are all about inspiration. Even the last marathon runner in '68 had a great story to tell. He said, I didn't come here to start the marathon, I came here to finish it. He finished like 3 hours after everyone else, and it was dark in the stadium, but he finished the race. So there's that. Am I the only one who got chills telling that story? Probably. But I know this, I've told it a million times. That's the difference. The last person was as important as the first for people somewhere in the world. And having access to that inspiration and be able to brand yourself as a part of that with the rings is an extraordinary, valuable product. Now we're talking about big events and not individual athletes. And the way the IOC, we basically put out $3.5 million a day to the rest of the world. That's over $1 billion a year. We put money that we receive back into the organizing committees, to the National Olympic Committees, of which there are 206, and each one gets a bundle of money each year, to the international federations, of which there are 40 something rather, rock climbing, wall climbing, etc.
Which is awesome.
It is, it's fun. But, it's made up. It's not, in the winter they have the actual mountaineering, and that's the difference.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, wall climbing and actual mountains. Which is a little bit, I don't know which one's more dangerous. I don't know why you do it, but some people do.
I'm ending my rock climbing career as we speak.
You can do it winter if you want.
Yes.
It's very cold.
Back to Little League.
Yeah.
There you go. I want to make sure to open it up for questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone over to you right now. Oh, go for it.
So as far as discovery, how does the uninterrupted? Oh, never mind.
Look at
Mike. So looking at bringing other content from sports around the world, how do you make sure that those eyeballs are also being captured in different markets other than local? So you gave the example about surfing, how it's going to be really big in Brazil and in other countries, but how do you make sure that Americans and people in other countries are also seeing that content as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, in a digital world, in a digital global world, it is very difficult to be in one country. So by virtue of being online, by virtue of being on YouTube or any of these platforms, you are in fact de facto global. How we think about it is our first international expansion was Uninterrupted Canada. And so if you can imagine, Canada, a little different from the US. And so our mantra, more than an athlete, and our kind of value proposition doesn't change. We're still amplifying voices of athletes. We're still kind of cutting edge. We're still going to be the alternative to like an ESPN. But the difference is we may do more hockey in Canada. And that doesn't mean that our business changes. It's just the voice may just change a little bit to reflect that hockey is a bigger sport in Canada. And so when we're in Brazil, same thing. So when we launched You in Brazil, and I don't know when that will be, if anyone's Brazilian can help, let me know. That might be a surfing play. And so surfing might become there, and that might be more football and surfing. So we want to make sure that we are representative of the country that we're in. And then in the US, the best content bubbles up. So if Canada does something amazing that we think that will resonate with our audience, we'll make sure that our audience sees that. We'll have someone that's always looking at all the pieces, but we can't, one day look up, if we're in 30 countries, have 30 countries worth of content showing up in the US. That's not a good consumer look for our consumers.
Fair Pay to Play Act. Can you talk about how that is going to change the way Uninterrupted does business with the athletes that they're working with? So Caitlin Ohashi, the UCLA gymnast, and the viral nature of what happened with her, and there's another new gymnast this week. These women the game will change for them if that act passes. So can you talk a little bit about that? Since the genesis where I learned about it was on the shop.
Yes. So a few months back, we had the Governor Newsom from California here on our show, and he signed a bill that really allowed for amateur athletes or collegiate athletes to be compensated for activities that they've done, either that are online or as related to the sport. So the real simple answer to your question from an uninterrupted perspective is no change, because from our perspective, we've always believed that athletes should be compensated. And so it's an easy thing for us. Where it gets difficult is that was a California law, and Is there 50 other states? Since it's global world, I'm going to say I don't know how many states we have. So is it 50? It's 50? Okay, cool. So 50 states. So that means 49 left, by my math. And so 49 other states have to kind of get that same messaging. And in order for that to happen, those are all state, legislations that need to be passed. And in absence of any federal mandates, then the only other option is for the NCAA to actually change their position, and which, as we know,
5 to 7 years.
Tricky. So you're guessing 5 to 7 years? Okay.
She disagrees. We had an argument about this.
Okay.
But I think so. I think you'll get enough states to pass between now and then that
there will be a snowball effect, I think. But I think the important thing to know is that this thing ain't stopping. And so I think everyone is looks at the NCAA and all of the money that comes through there on the backs of athletes and realizes there's a lack of parity. And when I went to school, I went to school with the Fab Five. So, I saw those guys and I knew it doesn't make sense, right? You have these guys that are global sensations, or maybe domestic. But for them to actually make money, or they couldn't take $5 from, a coach for lunch. So it just doesn't make sense. And so I think once that stuff gets resolved, it'll be much easier for us to work with athletes, amateur athletes, and then making sure that if we do something with a brand, we can make sure they got paid, because we would appreciate that. We're not going to do anything to endanger their, amateur status, eligibility.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Not going to damage that, but it's also going to create an opportunity for, again, this idea of they're going to manage their IP. They better understand how to be educated to manage their IP.
The word amateur insults me, used with collegiate level athletes. It's ridiculous. It's an old way of saying we control you. It never made sense to me. Why are the athletes the only ones who can't have additional jobs? If I was a music major for 3 years, I could do gigs. If you're a scientist, you can do things. Why is it only athletes who are treated away because they can get away with it? That's the only reason. And I'm happy for this law. We need more of them, but I want to make sure that women are not the sacrifice for this, for guys to get paid. And that's a real problem that has to be addressed before I'm happy with this law.
Well, that's an important message to end on, a really important message. So thank you both for taking the time, and thank you all for being